Board games, it's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real-time games and I'm not gonna shout it. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing, and today I will ponder about real-time games and their nature, what qualities they might possess, and we'll probably not talk about which is best. I'm not going to talk about subjectivity today, just the qualities in these games that we can play. Real time games, it's what I'm talking about. Real time games. I'm not gonna shout. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Bez, and this is Bezzy Beats and Briefer Blether. I believe that this is episode 447. Yep, I believe that's correct. And today I am going to be talking about the nature of real-time games. Yesterday, and a wee bit also on Monday, I talked about real-time games with Fabricio, and I just thought I had started thinking about a taxonomy, started thinking about what could be within a real-time game. And so, yeah, I just thought, let's chat more about that. But before I get to do that, I'm going to chat about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. Yesterday, I don't believe that I actually played any games, which is mildly unusual. I'm a very lucky person because I get to play games most days of the week. Played games on Monday. I'll play games tonight. I might play games tomorrow. I'll definitely play games on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But yeah, I did not play games yesterday. But what I did do is I had some delights in the form of cupcakes. So I'm just sharing the screen. So there's a place in London called Crumbs and Doilies. I've heard that it is superb. It is indeed. Now, some people say, oh, this was amazing, or this was the best cupcakes we've ever had. Neither Layla nor myself are that much into cupcakes, but looking at the image, so one of them is like a raspberry chocolate cupcake with a soft, like, actually, I think that was a red velvet with a soft white icing on it. The one underneath is a kind of caramelly cupcake. It's a basic cupcake, but the top has caramel on it. The one on the top right is a Biscoff cupcake, a Biscoff weaved into it, and the one on the bottom right is the one that we both decided is the best, which is chocolate and raspberry with a bunch of tiny marshmallows. Basically, the raspberry and the chocolate offsets each other brilliantly. And it was Layla's birthday, so this was a special treat, us going out together. And we wandered around Soho. We discovered things like this shop window where there's severed hands and feet and snake and skulls, all wearing these steampunk goggles and stuff. And yeah, wow, what a window display. Obviously, the limbs and stuff were all plastic. Went to the restaurant booking. I had something called rice punch. It was very ricey. It had a bit of sweetness, but it wasn't too sweet. It was delicious. Layla indulged in some sort of spirit. Soju, I think it's called. It's very clean. It's almost tasteless. And Layla was like, oh, this is very dangerous. I could just drink liters of this. For me, I mean, yeah, what didn't have much taste compared to other spirits, but I definitely felt it going down. I think I had maybe 1.5 shots. We had all sorts of kimchi. This is some cabbage kimchi. We had cucumber kimchi and some radish kimchi, and then we had shredded radish, which was lovely, some softly cooked bean sprouts, and some spinach, which was my favorite. We had a hot plate in the middle, and of course we went to get the hot plate. There are other options. The other options being basically a bowl of soup noodles. But yeah, we splashed out. Well, I splashed out, and now it's very nice that the person comes to your table and they do the cooking, and then but putting down all the squid at the start, that annoyed both of us. I want to say, yeah, that it felt like surely the point of having this hot plate is so that it you get to cook it at the rate you want. And hello, J Fool's Guard. It is lovely to see you. Who says J Fool's Guard is glad that they're going to eat soon because this is making them hungry. Well, I do apologize, I guess, but maybe it's a good thing that, yeah. But do you get what I mean? Like, kind of going to a hot plate thing. I've never been to a hot plate place before. So do they normally take control and then cook all the squid? And after we'd eaten maybe only half the squid, they came back, and these photos are slightly out of order. You can see I've got so much squid there left on my plate, and they're already putting down all the pork, and literally all the pork, and then all the there. You see, when I've got still a good amount of squid left on my plate, the pork is all fully cooked, and it's too fast. It's too fast, and then the pork ended up being dry and like just cold. And obviously, you want it when it's hot off the thing. That's the ideal. But then, if you want the ideal, then let the people kind of cook it themselves. Surely, I mean, yeah. I do, so towards the end, Layla kind of did get assertive and said, please let us do it. We eat very slowly. And so we did put down the beef ourselves, and that was very nice. And then at the end, they did bring some free chocolate mochi, which with teeny tiny spoons. And so, yeah. And J Fool's Guard has never had a hot plate before. It sounds delicious. But yeah, I think that maybe it's because a lot of drunk people come in and they might burn themselves. But yeah, I think, yeah, you'd rather do it yourself if that's meant to be the selling point. I mean, hot plates in the middle of the table, surely. And in retrospect, I kind of wonder, maybe one day it'll be like, okay, sign this form that says you accept the risks of it's a hot plate and you might get burnt, and don't be stupid and don't get burnt, just so that people don't come in drunk. And if that's what they're worried about, have people sign a waiver. But yeah, it was just really, I mean, I did have all the controls on the side and I'd worked it out easily. Anyway, so that is my recent highlights. What are your recent highlights? What have you enjoyed? What are your achievements? My achievements, I got a business meeting next week with Company D, as I'm going to call them. So Company A and B reached out to me for a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after someone makes noises, asking if I would be prepared to publish it with them. I reached out to Company C because I thought that Company C might be appropriate. I was told that it was almost but not quite the right fit. And then Company D has reached out to me. So Company D it's very exciting. And they're based in Asia, so we're going to have a thing. And J Fool's Guard says, yeah, just put a sign there. Don't be stupid, yeah. I mean, if only that could cover everything. But yeah, what are some of your recent highlights? Do you have anything that you're proud of that you want to share? Otherwise, feel free to ask any questionably quick questions. Questionably quick questions. This is the next section. It's not an interrogation. It's just the questionably quick question section. And whilst you're thinking of what questionably quick question you would like to ask me, I'm going to talk about a brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? Okay. I'm going to just repeat what we said yesterday, that real-time games are brilliant, because we talked about the stress, which can be a really good thing. Yeah, sure, some people don't like stress, but that can be a brilliant thing. We talked about the nature of involvements, like everyone's involved all the time. Now, yes, it's true that there are accessibility issues. There are accessibility issues in all sorts of games. For me, it's the tension, the stress, the rapid nature of it. Like, just my attention is entirely focused on the game, and I don't have to worry about anyone else suffering from analysis paralysis or anything like that. It's just boom, boom, boom. And if you're too slow, well, then that's that. And so I'm going to say that for me, real-time games are a brilliant thing. Hello, CD. It is lovely to see you. And hello, Timmy. It is lovely to see you too. I hope that you... I didn't realize that CD was called cheese these days. But it is lovely to see you both. I hope you're both generally well. CD asks, I haven't had to give an address for Wee Whimsical Creatures yet. Have I missed it? No, you have not. I put a survey yesterday for the people who pledged for their own creature, and also the first wave. I don't know how long it'll take me and Chris to go through the first wave. We do have like other... I'm not set up so that this is like the only thing that I can do like this week, and there are like physical things happening with Chris, but no, we will get to everything in due time. With anyone who backed that Kickstarter, there is a kind of estimated date, and I understand that those dates are further into the future maybe than you would like, but hopefully we will meet those dates, and hopefully that will be okay. And so, yeah, I'm going to basically send the next survey once this is almost completely sent out, and once we're ready for the next 100, if that makes sense. So we're sending this 100 and then the next 100. Okay, we've got another comment that tunnels are brilliant. I would agree, like going from one place to another place. Going through a mountain, it doesn't mean that you have to go over. It doesn't mean you have to go around. You can go through the tunnel, yes. Lots of engineering work goes into those tunnels, but once they're made, yes, tunnels are brilliant. Thank you very much for your patience, CD. And Timmy, who asks, what are real-time games? Real-time games. Yeah, let me actually flip the banner. Main topic. Now I'm talking about the main topic. Main topic, real-time games. Okay, real-time games are games where it matters, where basically the timing of your action matters to a large degree. Now, to a large degree, let me give an example of what is probably the best-selling and most known real-time game in the world, which is Double. In Double, you've got a bunch of cards, and so each card's got a whole bunch of pictures, and you're looking at them thinking, okay, for example, this picture and this picture, what do they have in common? There is always one item in common. Some of the items are different sizes, but what is the one that they have in common? You can see it's the little hand. And then if I look at, these two, what's the one that these two have in common? Oh, it's the eye. And these are really small tasks. Basically, there are small variations you can play on the game, but a lot of real-time games are basically about small task, first person to do the task, get some reward, and then carry on, repeat, until end game is triggered. Maybe that means you run out of the deck. Maybe that means that one person runs out of their cards. Maybe that means that one person collects all the cards. I don't know. So Jungle Speed is also a very well-known real-time game. I didn't bring it into this room, but Twin It is illustrated by the other illustrator of Jungle Speed, and let me talk about Twin It instead. This is the special can edition. But the normal edition is just as good. So in this one, there's a bunch of different images. Sorry, just a second. You've got a whole bunch of cards. You're flipping these over one at a time. And then when you see two that are identical, you have to put your fingers on them. When you put your fingers on them, you grab them. And those are points. When all the cards have been flipped over, that's the end of the game. and that is it. So you see, both of these games have something in common, which is incredibly simple tasks. It's just, okay, what's matching? Okay, what's matching? Identify it. Once you've identified it, it's the first person to do so, and then you win those cards or you get rid of your cards. And so hopefully that explains things. And hello, Maya. It is lovely to see you. This is just this isn't a well thought out lecture or anything. You know, these are blethers. I don't like write long lists of stuff, but this is just me wanting to blether. I've got a big pile. I've got a big pile that big of real-time games on this chair and a few behind me, and I thought I'd just talk about them and the qualities and what brings them all together and stuff. CD says, I love real-time games. There's one way spaceships and loading cargo has to deliver to planets. Someone brought it randomly to a game night and it wasn't available to buy. Shame, because I'd never seen it before or after. There's one way... There's one where spaceships and loading car... Do you mean Galaxy Trucker? They just republished Galaxy Trucker as the Galaxy Trucker remastered or something. But yeah. It had timers and actual ships to move around. That does sound exciting. Oh. So I don't think I've ever played a real-time game, says Timmy. Now, interestingly, I talk a lot about non-digital games. I sometimes talk about video games. I sometimes talk about games that use an app. But interestingly, with video games, real-time nature is almost the norm. Whereas with board games, because it's what they excel at, it's, okay, puts it down on the table. Now one person takes a turn. Now another person takes a turn. It is your turn, and the game is essentially on pause until you do your thing. No one else does anything. And that's the normal way of games, whether it's chess or Go or backgammon or Hero Card, Rise of the Shogun, or Tribe by Iten Games. Nice game, this one, by the way. Hero Card, not so much. Sorry, I shouldn't be bad-mouthing. Yeah. So for the most part, even if you're doing something dexterous, but then when you get to sports, when you get to things that involve physical objects, like snooker, well, snooker is definitely a turn-based game because you're poking your ball, and then, sure, the speed and everything you do at that moment matters, but once you've hit the ball, then the other person could take like 30 seconds or 5 seconds or 2 minutes to ponder their next move. And the only thing stopping them from taking 2 minutes for every move is the social dynamic of, hey, you're taking a bit long. I'm getting annoyed playing with you. Why are you taking 2 minutes overall every time you go to shoot a ball? But then you've got things like badminton and football, also known as soccer in some parts of the world. You've got, basically most sports have a real-time element because there's a physical aspect. And so that's where it's not like you have to do something first or you have to do something fastest necessarily, but you have to do something at the appropriate time. Like when a ball is coming at you in tennis, you have to hit it at the correct time. So yes, that is a real-time element. And similarly with video games, there's a lot of real-time stuff going on. Snooker is slightly different from pool, but it's very, very similar. Snooker is kind of the slightly more complicated version. And Maya has a shout out to Situation 4. I do not know that one. Where's my pen? Or I don't have a pen. I'm going to grab this little pencil and then I will write that down to check it out at some point in the future. Situation 4, 1968. Okay, I'll check that out, and thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, and like CD mentions, yes, you've got stuff like Kitchen Rush where you've got... And Kitchen Rush would not be a real-time game unless... So in Kitchen Rush, for those who aren't aware, it's a worker placements game. You put your different tokens in different places. Everywhere you put a token, you're activating an action. But then to place a token, these tokens happen to be sand timers. You can only place a token when the sand has run out. So it's basically a real-time game because you have a finite amount of time to complete the level, to do the things, but you have to wait. The sand timers are there to slow you down. The sand timers do not make it a real-time game, because if it was just the sand timers without the overarching... so I'm going to get this out of... if it was just the sand timers without the overarching time limits, then sure, it runs out, but there's nothing meaning that I have to grab it now rather than in a few seconds. But because of that time limit, every second matters. And hello, Games by Manuel. It is lovely to see you. Now, let me get rid of that. Okay, so I want to start off with chatting about games that are, yeah, real-time games at their very... I'm just going to go through a bunch of games that I have and talk about them. I kind of feel like there's... Yesterday, we also talked about how every game is arguably a real-time game. Because if you're bluffing, if I say, okay, raise in poker. Let's say I'm playing poker and it takes me 20 seconds to raise. That tells you something. And I think with asymmetric information, that timing can be a way that you learn more about what I'm thinking. It might be not just the body language, but everything else. But I think that subscribing to Jeff Engelstein's fuzzy logic theory, that is maybe 10% real-time games, whereas other non-bluffing games, Fabricio made an argument that if I was playing Go, let's say I'm playing Go against someone who's really good, and then they take a long time over a certain move, that might tell me that there's something complicated going on, and maybe if I think it's a simple board position, maybe it's not as simple as I originally thought. So again, because of that asymmetry of information, and it can only really happen if I'm playing against someone who's much better than me. But arguably, those could be said to be, Go could be said to be 2% real time. But then something like this, you could say is like 90 or 100% real time game. I don't know. So let's start off with the simplest category, games in which you have to do a thing, and the first person to do the thing gets a reward. Reminds me a bit of turn-based RPG video games that added the time-dependent timers. Yes, for sure. Going back to Kitchen Rush, I think that video games and board games have in recent years learnt a lot from each other. So I think that's really good point. But yeah, games in which you do something and then the first person to do it wins a point or whatever. So you've got Twin It. You've got Double. Very, very similar. You've got Smart Sky. This is a little known game that I've got. It's basically it's kind of like Anomia, and again, flip over cards. You need to think of certain words matching a category, starting with a certain letter. First person to do it wins the card. This actually leads me. Actually, before I go there, I'm going to mention Difference and Difference Junior. Two very nice games from Gigamic, although bear in mind I am biased towards Gigamic because they do still publish Yogi, and are giving me a substantial amount of money every year. But these are basically spot the difference games. So let me look at the junior version. Here are 2 cards. Can you tell the differences between these 2 cards? There are 2 differences. I can see one of the differences straight away. I can't see the other. Yeah, I'm looking at, I don't know, we could probably look at this for a while and not be oh, the tree branch. Okay, yes. Tree branch? Oh, no, it's not the tree branch. What it is, it's firstly this little flower in the very bottom left corner. That flower, sorry, that flower over there, that little rose is not visible here, and also the little girl is holding a dress color. So yes, between the way that this game works is very clever. I just want to go into it for 1 minute. There's a platonic ideal of an image. Every real image has one difference between the platonic ideal and this image. So remember, the platonic ideal is something that they had on a hard drive somewhere, but it doesn't even exist. Now, because every image is one step removed, that means that between every 2 images, there's always 2 differences. And that's very, very clever. I have to admit, I prefer the junior version to the senior version just because the things are more joyful. Again, you just spot the differences, and first person to spot the difference gets reward. Talking about that, we've got Happy Salmon. In Happy Salmon, this is the same. Be the first to do the thing. Be the first to high-five someone. And no, actually, Happy Salmon is completely different. Happy Salmon isn't about a race for a common objective. Even when you look at Jungle Speed, that turns it slightly on its head, because in Jungle Speed, there's never in Jungle Speed, you rarely have everyone involved in a grab. Yes, sure, there is one card that says all grab. Everyone grab that totem in the middle. First person to grab it gets rid of their face-up cards. But really, for the most part in Jungle Speed, it's only 2 people who are involved at a time. And that's a really interesting design choice, because as soon as there's a match, no, it's not anyone who can join in. And it's the same with Anomia. Anomia is a game where people flip over cards one at a time, and a person whose pattern, whose symbol matches someone else's symbol, needs to shout a word that matches what's written on that other person's card. And on the other so again, this brings just 2 people into the competition. We've got Gobbit, another game where it's about, okay, I need to be tense, I need to watch out. And now I would like to talk about, the design benefits and drawbacks, just pondering the things, and feel free to shout out or say, when I say shout out, honestly, like if someone wants to join in, if you want to join me on video because you don't feel up to typing, then you can. Otherwise, just like type away. You don't need to use all caps. I will see your things. But yeah, I'm thinking that the benefit of making it into just a couple of people involved in the grab at a time is that, well, firstly, if one person is way better than everyone else, it might be that sometimes the second best player wins, because the second best player and the first best player aren't involved in as many things. Because like if every time everyone was involved, it can get a bit demotivating, right? Let's say I am the 3rd best player at the table. I mean, look, there's some vagaries. Sometimes the 3rd best player will be a little bit faster. Sometimes the best player will be a little bit slower. But let's say I am even, somewhere in the middle. Let's say I'm somewhere in the middle. Now, if everyone is racing for the same thing at the same time, as in twin it or difference or double, then I'm going to get a bit sad. I'm going to get a bit maybe demotivated because someone else is just going to keep winning. That's what happened to David Brain when they played an early prototype of a game about grabbing creatures. That's totally different. But if you make it so that only 2 people are involved, well then, yeah, sure, sometimes I might stand no chance, but sometimes, oh, I've got a chance, and you still sometimes have more chance to get those moments of satisfaction. I think that's the main benefit of it. I think it's also the amount of tension, like, because you aren't involved in every single step, it actually involves little breaks. Yesterday, we were talking about how non-stop, do it as fast as you can, do it as fast as you can, do it as fast as you can be incredibly tiring. And so that's why you want the timers in Kitchen Rush to actually slow you down. Why the flipping over of the cards in Jungle Speed and not being involved is actually a very pleasant experience. It builds up the tension, it builds up the suspense, but you don't need to jump in every single time. And so, yeah, that's something that I wanted to talk about. Oh, sorry, games. There were 2 other games in a very similar genre that I wanted to briefly mention. Galapagos, you've got to slam your hand or your card on creatures that match certain criteria. And again, first to do it gets those cards. And Windy Woody. So first to this Windy Woody, I love this game. I really, really like this game. It's basically follow the lines and turned into a game. So you see you've got different bits of board, the lines continue, and then eventually the hands lead to kites. And then you flip the boards around, you move the boards around, so it's different every round, and you are just racing to do the things. There are 2 colors. There's basically, I think, like 5 different ways to play. One of them, it says which thing. One of them, you look at the color dice and you might be trying to find out which of the people leads to this color of kite. And then, but there's 5 different ways. Again, I think this suffers from the main thing that all games where it's everyone going for the same thing, suffers from, which is at a certain point, one person is that tiny bit better. They regularly win until they get tired, and then someone else starts winning, and then the third player, like someone further down, just doesn't feel like they are even involved. Like there's not even any point in them playing. CD wants to give a shout out for Happy Salmon. She uses a version for diversion during training courses. Manuel was surprised by Escape the Curse of the Temple because the main mechanic is dice rolling, which Manuel mostly saw as a turn-based thing. Also, Manuel likes the use of a soundtrack as a timer because it sets a tone and ramps up as time runs out. Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about soundtracks as a timer because you've got that. You've got, let's talk about Atmosphere, the old VHS games. Let's talk about Space Alert. So in Atmosphere, it is basically a turn-based game, but as things happen at certain points in the game, the video which should be constantly playing is going to say, "Will you do this?" or "Whoever is in the back," and then certain effects happen. And so it brings a real-time nature to it because the timing of that event, the real time of that event, is going to benefit or punish people in certain positions. The weird thing is, because you don't know what the timing of this is, it's trying to evoke a sense of dread, hence the name Atmosphere. And it's obviously a pun on atmosphere, but fear is spelled F-E-A-R. And with a soundtrack like Escape the Curse of the Temple. It's much more a you need to win by the end. And I think that's a big genre of it as well. Like, you need to do this thing by the end. Cooperative speed games, that's the easiest way to make a cooperative real-time game. If you have done this thing by the end, you win. If you have not, you lose. Clear, succinct, simple. And yeah, CD also gives a shout out to Escape Curse of the Temple. Someone made a life-size one where you move from room to room when the dice rolls. Each room was a soft sponge tile. Oh, that does sound fun. Now, I also want to talk about, I believe it's called Zombie 10, which is a zombie game where you've got essentially a 10-minute soundtrack. And once you've got a soundtrack, you can make trigger events. You can build information into that soundtrack. You can say, okay, every minute there is going to be a growl, and when there's a growl, you need to all put in 5 zombies into this one place. Yes, CD, the game which had a videotape running in the background was Atmosphere. So just to Atmosphere, ATMOSFER. So yeah, the Zombie 10, it's like, okay, you've got information coming up. It's not just, can you beat the game? But if you are almost beating the game at 8 minutes 55, but then 9 minutes, whoa, we get more zombies, oh no. And then we've got 1 more minute to try and beat it. And it gives it a bit of peaks and troughs and escalation and tension. And yeah, that's a really interesting way to build it. Same with Space Alert, where Space Alert, they actually give you all the instructions. You need to react to these instructions. You need to work out what they're doing in the real time. And then at the end of it, you are analyzing, okay, how did we actually do? Did we go well or not? And oh, it was apparently Zombie 15, not Zombie 10. Thank you for correcting me. And yeah, let's talk about actually, I'm going to talk about Wibble, because Wibble for the L deck. So for those who don't know, Wibble is a word game for my deck of cards where you shout a word containing one of these letters and one of these letters. So I could shout no, but I could also use any additional letters I wanted. I could shout honey, I could shout onion, or interrogation. I could say anything I wanted as long as it used one of these and one of these. I could say huh, H-U-H, any of those. And now at this point, this is an incredibly simple and basic and not very good game. But the thing that happens is once you win, you get one of these cards. And so you would just have to shout one from here and one from here. You could still shout honey or no, because the new card is an OD, the previous one was an NH, but I've just picked up the OH. So now I have to shout something with more going on. And each time I win, I get more personal cards, whereas there's always only 2 public cards. And at a certain point, this is the bit that I'm proudest of in the game of Wibble, which is this ramping up of personal obligations. By making the challenge a little bit harder just for one person, that makes it so that everyone's involved in the game. At a certain point, other people are going to be catching up. And sure, I might win the game because I've played it loads of times and I'm very good at it. But if we're playing together, then you are going to feel involved. Does that make sense? Because I don't think it matters as much who wins. I think what's really important in the game, partially hope, but it's also this feeling of agency. It's just this feeling of and CD asks, how do you win? You win by having the most cards at the end of the game. So once you get to the end, like, yeah, I might have 12 cards, and yeah, if you look at on Wednesdays on the twitter.com/ELL deck, then yeah, so every point that you get is basically becoming harder and harder and harder for you. There is a little bit more to it than that. It's kind of got a zigzag difficulty spiral. But my point is that you've got this thing. Now, let me look. Okay, so here's a prototype of a game about frantically counting colors and shapes, and it gets harder each time you score a point. This is using the same mechanism of Wibble. So you flip a card. This card tells you what you've got to count. So on one side, it might show a big multicolored symbol, which means you count all the X's. There's one. Very simple. There's one X. Next time, okay, you've got to count the circles. Okay, there's... Everyone else shouts 2. You've got to remember to shout 3. And once... This game's much simpler. It's just the first person to get to 5 cards wins. And you see people getting to 3 cards and 4 cards. And the interesting thing is that you make a mistake, because even the simplest task in a real-time game, because you're pushing to do it as fast as you can, you are pushing yourself to make mistakes. I think that's a really interesting thing about real-time games. And so, because you want to nip it, but if adults are playing, it's going to get insanely fast, because we're thinking, okay, I need to not only count to 4 or 5, but I need to do it faster than anyone else. I'm going to just do it based on instant sight, slam, and say 4. Oh dear, it was actually 5, for example. And at a certain point, it's that risk, it's that tension from everyone else also pushing you to do your own thing faster and faster. And that's a really nice thing about real-time games, that as long as your opponents are on a similar level to you, the difficulty will adapt. I mean, sure, in theory, a real-time strategy game can adapt. I mean, sorry, not a turn-based strategy game, I should say. But let's say if we're playing Go, well, yeah, I guess a child could play that, but I'm just thinking that there's a massive gulf in like rules complexity. For some games are just for adults. You need a certain amount of ability to keep rules in your head. Some games, you know, if I'm not going to play Connect 4 or Tic-Tac-Toe, those games don't entertain me as an adult. But for children, it's fine. Whereas once you've got a game that's actually allowing you to sort of that's making it so that you are racing against other people, but you're still having to push yourself. That's a really nice nature, that even the simplest task as an adult can, even a trivial task like how many circles are there, can become surprisingly tricky and still trip you up. So that's a big draw of real-time games where you're racing against other people. I wanted to talk quickly about Grabble, and a game about grabbing creatures that are totally different and watching out for turnips. So this uses a mechanism that I've not seen in other games. So for Grabble, you start off with 1 card. Let's say I've got this IC, and it's got lines around it. I can grab a card with a C, or a card with lines on it. So I could grab this RB, because it's got lines on it. I could carry on and take all the cards with lines. Or now I could take the RM, because now you're always matching the top card, and everyone's working on their own pile. And what this means is that, sure, at the end of the game, I might have 10 cards, you might have 30 cards, but at least I did something. At least I was engaged. At least I was, next time, maybe I'll have 12 cards and you'll have 28. Do you know what I mean? And it's not like a real-time game where every contest, if I'm 0.1 second slower than you, oh, you win. Oh, you win. Oh, and then sure, I might be able to say, oh, it was so close. Oh, it was so close. But there's this constant dissatisfaction. But when you're grabbing your own pile, every card that you grab is a moment of triumph. And you need these little achievements in a game. So with this game, it's basically, there is a certain end game trigger where you slam the cards at the end, and when there's fewer than 10 cards left, you want to be the person to say grabble. But ignoring that, it's basically gets to the end. The person who's got the most cards is obviously the winner, but you pass it onto your left and check. There's an audit trail. I do want to talk about audit trails, and yesterday with Fabricio, we kind of talked about some games are all about pushing you just to do, can you do this thing? Can you do this thing? Like in set, I'll say, oh, I found one set. Oh, wait, it wasn't quite correct. In double, I might say, oh, these two, but there's no auditing. We're assuming that it's correct because it's very easy to see clown, clown, those are both matching. That is one of the beauties of double, to be fair. If those symbols were more similar, then it wouldn't work because you might accidentally make mistakes. The nature of double is that it's going to be super simple to see, are you correct or are you not? Once it has been pointed out, it will not even be a question of, yes, obviously there's two clowns, one on this card, one on the other one. Whereas in Jungle Speed, it's like, oh, is this the same pattern? Is it not? And it's intentionally made to confuse you. Same with Twin It. Same, frankly, yes, all of my games are games where you might make a mistake at speed. And the fact that people do occasionally make mistakes in Grabble does make me wonder, how often do people make mistakes in Double? But is that audit trail an important thing in games, in real-time games? I think the key thing is Fabricio was talking about a strategic game where doing a move is easy, it's doing the correct move is harder, but you do your move, and yeah, that's the way to a strategic real-time game that maybe doesn't need that sort of audit trail. Yeah, so this is, I think this is actually the most recent prototype that I've drawn up. This is a game about grabbing creatures that are totally different and watching out for turnips. Oh, that was appropriate. That's a turnip. So these two creatures are not totally different. They've got different heads, different bodies, but the legs are the same. Another two creatures. Wait, that's another turnip. Let me try to find two creatures that are actually... There we go. Oh, yep. Anyway, I promise you that some of the creatures are totally different. You've got different heads, different bodies, and different legs, but there's only a few of each. And so sometimes, yeah, there we go. The creature on the... One creature has a mouthy head and no eyes. One creature has lots of eyes and no mouth. One creature has arms. One creature has tentacles. One creature has two legs. And one creature has a tail. And so every time you're grabbing a creature, making sure it's totally different. And occasionally, you can grab a turnip. You're allowed to grab 5 turnips during the game. If you grab a turnip, then a turnip is totally different to a creature. And so you can go creature, turnip, creature, turnip, creature, turnip as you want. But if you grab more than 5 turnips over the game, then you lose. Now, what this is, again, a diminishing resources real-time game. It's only real-time because there's resources, and the availability of resources and possibility of actions is diminishing. You could compare it to pick a pig or pick a dog. I can't think of Yeah, I think that's literally. I'm sure there's other things out there, but that's the only one that I'm aware of. Yeah, where everyone's grabbing stuff and you're building up your own pool, and it's like, hey, I managed to grab some things. With this game, what the turnips bring to it is almost now it's not just about the turn to turn, grab this creature. It's also about the long term. When do I grab the turnips? And how many turnips have I already grabbed? You've got to keep that number in your head. Holding a number in your head whilst you're also checking that all these creatures are totally different is going to make things marginally trickier. But so we've got games in which the first person to do something gets reward. Games in which you want to do as much of something as you can before other people take away all the resources. You've also got games in which you have a timer. Like, Paperback talks about a timer. There's a version of chess you can play with a timer. And it might just be, hey, you've got this much time to play. When you play Go online, when you play anything on Board Game Arena normally. I mean, yeah, with Board Game Arena, it's more of a soft timer because you don't instantly lose. You need to actually kick out the other person. But with Go, you've got, okay, maybe in a tournament or even just normal online play, it might be like, okay, we want to play Blitz. Or we want to play a somewhat speedy game. It's 30 seconds per move, but if you take longer than 30 seconds, then you eat up your next 30 seconds, and you're allowed to run out of 30 seconds like 5 times during the game. That's the way that it normally works in Go. And I think that's an interesting thing, just saying you have this much time, or Byoyomi, and there's a few different ways of working out timers for turn-based games. I'm not really going to go into full history. As I say, it's just a ponder and like an overview. Talking about timers, I want to talk about One Night Ultimate Werewolf, or Loup Garou pour une nuit. This is the epic battle version. Can't get this in English, but it's basically the best of the other main free games. Anyway, so the thing about these games is that it's not about being fast. It's not about doing things at a perfect time. But the entire game, the negotiation, has X minutes. You might have chosen 3 minutes for that. Now, if you say something at the start of 3 minutes, that's got different ramifications to if you say it's at the end of 3 minutes. And it's kind of like a chess clock, you might argue. But it's also mixed with that asymmetry of information. And so that's why I think that it's... Sure, we could talk about whether poker is or isn't a real-time game. And I don't think that this is as much a real-time game as Grabble, or a game about grabbing creatures that are totally different and watching out for turnips, or Twin It, or Jungle Speed, or Windy Woody, or Galapagos. But because you don't have to be as fast, it's not incumbent upon you to be as quick as you possibly can be, but you have to time your things slightly correctly. And I just think it's really worth pondering. I don't have much to say about that, but if you have any reactions to it, then let me know. Oh, here's a big game. Roll it. So you've got a ball in the middle. I'm not going to open this, but it's a wooden thing, and then you roll little balls down here to hit a big ball, and then you're trying to send a big ball into your opponent's goal. Now, with this game, it's all about the timing. If something goes into your goal, if you're too slow, then you'll roll the ball into the path of the big ball when the big ball has already passed by that point. You know what I mean? It's essentially, this is like sports as a tabletop game. We could also talk about Clask. We could also talk about foosball. And I think that all of these things are really interesting. They're clearly real-time games, but again, it's not just about being as quick as you possibly can. It's about the timing. What else did I? Oh yeah. So I had Happy Salmon. This is a really interesting example, and it doesn't quite fit into any of the others. It's basically, okay, for those who don't know it, you've got a bunch of cards that say things like Happy Salmon, High Five, Pound It, Switcheroo, and then if you do Switcheroo, you need to physically run around the table and swap places with the other person, or run around the bits of floor space, or wherever you're playing it. In Happy Salmon, once you have done all your cards, you win. But it's not purely about who was the first to do all those things and then they get a point. In this case, the point being winning the game. It's actually, there's a little bit more to it, because each time you do an action, your opponent, you need to find an opponent who is also trying to do that action. Sometimes when you switcheroo, there might be two people to pick from, and then you have to make some sort of decision. Who do you go with? Sometimes when that like tiny micro decision, and there's an element of randomness there. There's an element of player-induced chaos that is really brilliant. And it kind of feels like the franticness of Jungle Speed without the pause, without the tension, and, you know, more lighthearted touching with, you know, sure, you're grabbing and pounding, but you're not aggressively trying to yank a totem and potentially getting your nails torn off. So, yeah, I think that opportunities are being generated by other players, which reminds me kind of sports, because it's like a passing ball. You need to kick it when it's there. So when someone says high five and you've got the high five cards, you need to high five them. You need to be there at the correct moment. But it's also you're trying to do it as fast as you possibly can. It almost feels like roll it if you are trying to shoot 5 balls simultaneously into the other person's goal. But all of these games that we've talked about have been entirely symmetrical, by which I mean every player is doing exactly the same thing. 5 Minute Chase brings asymmetry into this. 5 Minute Chase is a game where it says 2 to 4 on the back of the box, but it's really a 2-player game with variants. And 5 Minute Chase, one person is trying to escape or trying to go from place to place, lay down these tiles. Oh my gosh, things falling out of the box. One person is trying to lay down these tiles, make sure that when there's a police blockade, the only way to put down something beside a police blockade is to make sure that there's trees. But your trees need to match, so I couldn't put those ones. So it's a case of hunting through these piles of cards and making sure that it matches, and then finding somewhere where the path matches. And eventually you've gotten far enough that you've gotten some of these special buildings, and then go into the final special building, and you win. Conversely, the other player is playing a completely different game of looking at a tile, seeing which direction are people facing. Whichever side has more people facing the exit, that is the side that you need to place a token of that symbol. So, for example, if it was going off this way, then there's 2 people. Oh, there's 3 people here facing down. So if it was continuing downwards, because there's 3 people facing down, the chaser would have to grab a little blue star. 2 people doing completely different things. And the chaser is essentially trying to catch up with the criminal, and you're trying to, as the police person, you're trying to catch up and do your tasks faster than they're laying down tiles, and then eventually you place a token on their last tile and you've captured them, assuming you've not made any mistakes. And so this is very much a do the task before the other person to win, but this has a really interesting amount of interaction that for one person, the amount of work that they need to do is constantly building as the runner gets further and further away. And conversely, for the runner, and the other interesting thing is the asymmetry, of course. I mean, there's something really, really interesting there. And yeah, there's not a lot of real-time games with asymmetry. I did want to talk about Wordsy, previously known as Prolix, but let's talk about the Wordsy rules. And Manuel says, I was so happy for that designer, Anthony Proetti and Dave Neal, because I was demoing a game at the publisher's booth, saw them pitch, and saw how excited the publisher got. It went perfectly. Awesome. Yeah, for me, it really pushes the bounds of what a real-time game is and could be. Now, Wordsy. In Wordsy, you're making words. The method, the manner, that's not important. The important bit is that at any point, someone can flip a timer. And once that 30-second timer has been flipped, they have to have written their final word before flipping the timer. Now everyone else gets 30 seconds to finish the word. If, as the person flipping the timer, you manage to equal or even beat the words from enough other people, you get a bonus, because not only did you beat them or equal them, but you were first. Go, you were amazing. Whereas for everyone else, if you manage to beat the person who flipped the timer, then you get a bonus point, because well done. And so there's an element of when do you flip a timer, because you don't want to give points away. You don't want to... Sometimes that extra 30 seconds can make a bit of a difference. But once you've got something that's good enough, it's like, yeah, an extra 30 seconds won't help me that much. Now it's time for you to flip the timer. And this is a really interesting way. It's kind of an evolution of something that you might have seen in Robo Rally, for example, Richard Garfield's, I think, first design that got published. Yeah, I think Robo Rally is Richard Garfield's earliest design that's been published. Because, yeah, anyway. But, so in Robo Rally, once there's only one person remaining, flip over the timer, make sure that they've played all their cards by the end of that. It's a player-dictated, hey, let's not spend too much time on this. There's other player-dictated games, like Codenames, which says, oh, you may use a timer. Like, I'm actually struggling to think of one now. Come on, there's loads of games like this where you can flip over a timer if someone's taking too long. You know what I mean. But this one, where it's your performance is judged against the person who flips the timer, that's a really interesting design choice. I've not seen any other game that does it, and I would really like to see more of that. I think I've only really got one game Okay, I would like to talk about Fabricio's game from yesterday, Hyperwars. Fabricio's game, I said to them, it's just a phenomenal design choice. You've got a bunch of cards. The cards are simple to execute. It might say, okay, trade 2 cubes, take 2 cubes. That's simple. You're not going to mess it up. But which 2 cubes do you put in? That's a choice. The question of, okay, move one of your pieces to another space. That's simple, but where do you go? And so it's that kind of thing, like, yeah, the executing the actions is trivial. Making the actions good is slightly more complicated, but each card gives you one of these actions, and you're passing cards to your left. Each time you use a card, you pass it to your left, and so you want to do things as quickly as you can, because at the end of the game, the number of cards you have in your hand, that's negative points. So if you were doing things very slowly and you have like 20 cards remaining, well, that's a whole bunch of negative points. I think that's a genius way to say the cards tell you exactly what you can do. These cards tell you what you can do, and then just pass them around, and then the number you have, that's negative. That's genius. I also want to talk about Tom Jolly's so-called lightning game system. Tom Jolly is a designer, probably best known for Discwords, and Camelot is another attempt at a strategic real-time game. In Camelot, let me show you the board. You are playing as people in Arthurian times, which of course means that there's a lot of people named Arthur. So you start off with the Sword of Excalibur, which can only be drawn by people named Arthur. But everyone's got like at least 5 people named Arthur, and then you're all running towards the middle of the board, and you've got your little that I've put them in little bags. You've got units like there's Morgana, Galahad, who does attacks, and each turn you're moving 2 of your units. So your units get to move as many spaces as they have triangles. Basically, everyone moves 1 space except for Arthur, who moves 2. But once Arthur picks up the sword, Arthur's only moving 2 along. All the other people are... It's basically a war game. It's a tug of war. You're trying to get Excalibur to your starting point, wherever you set up your base. Now, the game, as I've just described it, that game would, if it were not for the real-time element, and you might be wondering, how does the real-time element come into it? Without the real-time elements, it would be a bit dull. But the way the real-time elements works is that 2 people get turn markers. It means this is your turn. You are allowed to move your 2 people. You are allowed to make an attack. You are allowed to... Yeah, that's basically it. You're allowed to move 2 people and make an attack. And when it's your turn, you do your turn as quickly as you can, because it moves to your left once you're done. And if the other one is about to get to you, but you're already holding one of the turn markers, well, then you've essentially been skipped, because there's 2 turn markers constantly going around the table. And if one person is a bit slower than anyone else, well, they will get fewer turns. And this was a really interesting idea to try and force people to play incredibly quickly. If you make moves in like 2 seconds, and there's obviously physical dexterity, boom, boom. If you are able to make moves in 2 seconds, then you will be more likely to get more moves. But let's say 2 people at the table are taking 10 seconds to take their moves. Well, then the person who's taking moves in 2 seconds won't actually get any benefit. So it's only really disadvantages the slowest person at the table if they are literally the slowest person at the table. If there's 2 people who were, if there's 2 people who are exactly the same amount of slowness, then it doesn't quite work. It is a fragile game. I think that it's a really interesting... J Fool's Guard says it sounds interesting, and yes, it is a delight to play, and I would really like to play more of it, but it's incredibly fragile based on the people around the table. And it is, again, something that's kind of dictated by other people. So here we've got take your move, but if everybody else combined has somehow caught up to the combined extra totals of the combined nature of you taking all your previous turns, then you skip one turn, and that's basically the punishment for taking too long on a turn. It's a weird one. It's how many people does it take to play? Asks J Fool's Guard. It's 3 to 5, 6. 3 to 6 players, it says. Playing time 5 to 30 minutes. And that's another thing about the game. Like, it is incredibly stressful for an actual solid real-time game to play a real-time game for 30 minutes. That's incredibly draining. But by the end, you're like, wow, that was an experience. Unless it ends in a stalemate, which it does sometimes. But, yeah. And J Fool's Guard says, the numbers of players surely affects the game. I would agree. Anyway, so I think that feels like, yeah, it feels like you've got real-time elements because you're racing against other people. You've got real-time elements because you're trying to get the most of something before dwindling resources run out, like Pass a Pig, Grabble, a game about grabbing creatures. That's our Society Difference about and watching out for turnips. I need to get that onto BGG. Pardon me. You've got games where you've got an overarching timer that you need to get something done within. Like, you know, that timer might mutate, but like a chess clock. You could argue like 5-minute chase, where the timer is kind of set by the other person, arguably, but 5-minute chase is a really weird one. Certainly, word games, if you start enforcing a timer, arguably One Night's Ultimate Werewolf, if you would consider that to be real time. You've got games, and like Robo Rally, definitely, it's kind of, okay, you've got this amount of time plus the amount of time of the second slowest person, which works well. You've got games where everyone's involved in something and everyone has to race at the same time. You've got games like Anomia or Gobbit or Jungle Speed, where not everyone is involved. You've got games where doing the action wins you points, and then most points at the end wins. Twin It, actually, I should have mentioned, has a really interesting mechanism where even there are 3 of each image, so once you've won one of the pictures, there might be a third one. There might not. It depends how it flips around. Or if it's already been taken, but because all the cards are double-sided, so you've got a picture on each side. And with Twin It, that does bring in a little bit of extra tension and a little bit of asymmetry and a bit of a feeling of catching up, which is interesting. I mean, 5-minute chase is a really, really interesting one, because essentially each time you put down a card, you're gaining more time for yourself as the fleer, as the criminal. As the police, each time the object is to put down all the tokens and the token on the last one before the criminal completes their objective. But the longer you leave it, the more tokens you will have to put down. There's And then there's a sense of other things happening that you need to react to, whether it's on a pre-scripted video or audio track, or whether it's balls moving around. And so, yeah, I don't really have any conclusion. But, yeah, that's just, I guess, a survey of real-time games, you could call it. I hope that's been interesting. It's been kind of, yeah, nice to kind of reflect on how many of these are about the other people involved and how the supremely interactive nature of 5 Minute Chase or Camelot or indeed Hyper Wars could be possibly expanded. CD, it has been lovely having you here. And hearing that you're going to sleep, that brings me to the end and asking over to you, what are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. This has been a long show. I am going to check up on Chris. I'm going to draw a comic for Hopeful Printing at Essen. I'm going to hopefully start packing some copies of a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after someone makes noises today. Get some stickers and compliments cards inside and put them into envelopes, see if we can print the names and stuff on them. Yeah, the comic, and then tonight I'm going to be playing Groot. That's what I'm up to. What are you up to, people who aren't sleeping? I've chatted about quite a bit. I guess I've kind of already done a bit of a recap and wrap up, but it's very much feels like the normal way of doing a real-time game is everyone tries to do task A, first person to do that task gets cards, for end of game, person with most cards wins. And I've seen so many games that do that, and I've even pitched a game that does exactly that, and it was taken by two publishers, in fact, who are looking at it seriously, but then 2020 happened. Well, it was already 2020 at the time, then pandemic happened. But I think that by thinking more mindfully about should everyone be involved in every race, should everyone be trying to do the same thing, should your completing an objective stop someone else from completing the objective and change the landscape of the game. Like, all of these things are worth pondering, and then we can bring a whole new approach to it. I would love to see more things where's my copy of I would love to see more things where one person flips a timer, and the person who flipped the timer, that means something. Now suddenly they're the enemy and everyone's trying to beat them, and they're trying. It would be interesting to see some evolution of this, although, as I say, if there's two equally slow players at the table, it just does not work. But basically what this does is it's a way of punishing one person if they are the only slow player. Yeah, maybe it's given you some inspiration, maybe not. It's been nice chatting. And if you want, follow me everywhere, Stuff by Bez. I'm streaming every day at 10 a.m. UK time. Tomorrow, I don't know what I'm going to chat about. Probably just, yeah, we'll see. It'll probably be a lot briefer. Today was a bit longer than I want this to normally be. I'm going to try and go back to my 20-30 minutes tomorrow. Feel free to share, spread the word. I want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Manuel, CD, J Foolsguard, Timmy. It's lovely to have you all here, and I hope that you're generally well. For now, there is basically one thing left for me to say. Thank you, and bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye bye, bye bye. This is the end of the show. Bye bye, bye bye. And now it's time to go to bye bye, bye bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye bye, bye bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye bye, bye bye. This is the end of the show. Bye bye, bye bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye. Bye bye, J Guard. Yeah, I'm generally well. And lots of love. And have a fantastic day. And enjoy the world. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.